Surprise, it's clickbait. You don't really need to worry about the AP tests unless you took a class in school that prepares you to take it and everyone else is doing it. The problem with AP tests is either you have taken a class on that subject, in which case the AP test is redundant because you've already taken a final exam for that class, or you haven't taken a class on that subject, in which case you'd probably need to spend about 150 hours of study time in order to get a 5. And considering that you're already taking classes in school, you should probably spend that time on extracurriculars instead. That being said, AP tests can be useful to help you structure your self-study if you're in a school that doesn't offer many English language classes about Western culture, or if your Chinese school doesn't make you take classes in Year 12 after you've finished applying, and you have nothing else to do, so you want to show the admissions officers that you're doing something productive when they defer your admission in March. Also, if you're in grade 10 or 11, you might consider signing up for certain AP prep courses instead of Toefl or SAT prep courses, because that way you get to practice all the same skills of reading passages and answering questions, except you also get to learn something useful at the same time, and you have something to show for it. Okay, so let's break these tests down into 4 different types. The first being exploration tests that you could probably self-study and pass in a few months. The second being tests that will probably be too hard, but preparing for them will be more useful than SAT or Toefl classes. The third being technical tests that are super hard and might be a good way of proving yourself. And fourth being tests that are redundant and you probably have no reason to consider. Quick self-study explorations. So let's say you're in grade 12 and you're looking for something productive to do after you finish admissions, something that you can tell admissions officers about in your letter to them after you get deferred. Or you're in grade 10 or 11 and want to explore or demonstrate interest in a subject that your school doesn't teach. These tests will test your understanding of a few basic concepts more than your knowledge of a broad set of facts, and it's possible to learn the material without reading through a lot of long and old text. Just by being clever, you might be able to guess through about half of the multiple choice questions. These tests all have reasonably high pass rates, and you might even be able to pass with 50 hours of self-study time without taking a class in school. In this group, we have Psychology, with 21% of students getting 5s, Computer Science A, with 25% of students getting 5s, Economics Micro, with 20% 5s, Economics Macro, with 20% 5s, and Government and Politics Comparative, with 21% 5s. Also, if you have a background in playing a musical instrument, you could probably self-study for music theory, with 23% 5s. Time-intensive Toefl study alternatives. Unlike the previous category, where you can get by just understanding a few basic concepts, these tests require you to be a very advanced reader in order to learn the material and pass the test. I've taught some of these classes to Chinese students, and my experience is that you would have to have a TOEFL of at least 105 to even begin to engage, and students with TOEFLs higher than that will, with difficulty and about 150 hours of self-study, be able to score a 4, which is quite impressive. Having said that, if your TOEFL is higher than 105, then you really should be pushing your skills with these sorts of classes, and getting 5s on at least a couple of these tests is something that top 20 US university students should be able to do. These tests include English language with 10% 5s. This course is about rhetoric and has nothing to do with vocabulary and grammar. The goal is to interpret how and why the writer is saying something rather than to merely comprehend and explain what they say. This test doesn't require much prep time if you're very skilled with language and abstract thinking, but if you're not there yet, then probably no amount of study time will make a difference. English literature with 5% 5s. You would have to start studying for this at least a year before you take the test to have time to read through all the books, but if you like to read, this would be a brilliant way to structure your hobby and show some hard results for your efforts. Unlike the English language test, this test is very time intensive. If you as an international student decide in Year 9 to read your way through this curriculum and successfully took this test in Year 11, that would be incredibly impressive, and in fact something I think every student should consider doing. Government and Politics United States with 13% 5s. This one is all abstract 1700s political arguments. It takes a special kind of student to be motivated to do this, and if you are that kind of student, then you should definitely do it. Human Geography, with 13% of testers earning 5s. Another one that you can really only pass if you've done hundreds of hours of reading about social issues and understood what you read. History classes are very time intensive and involve a lot of rare vocabulary, but despite their difficulty, knowing what happened is pretty much the essence of knowledge, and admissions officers eat that stuff up. You can choose from US History with 11% 5s, European History with 12% 5s, World History with 9% 5s, and Art History with 12% 5s. Self-studying to achieve a high score on one of these tests is one of the best ways to stand out as a Chinese student. It may be difficult and require discipline, but it's definitely possible to achieve, and at basically no cost. All your classmates will be wasting their time on SAT and TOEFL prep classes, panicking that there's nothing that sets them apart from other applicants. But if you have the foresight in grade 9 to realise that you can just read a bunch of books and become an educated person and get good SAT and TOEFL scores that way, then you win. Tests you could take to prove yourself if you've got a strength in a certain area. These are all tests that you can probably only pass if you've taken a full class in school, with lots of homework that was dedicated to helping you prepare for these tests. If you've already done this subject in high school under a different curriculum, then you don't really need to take the AP test again since you already received a grade. However, some of your tests may be harder than your high school curriculum, so taking them can help you prove your abilities. For example, if you're applying to a physics program and you write about your love for physics, then getting a 5 on the AP Physics exam, which only 6% of testers can achieve, would really help you demonstrate your commitment and excellence. However, if your interests are elsewhere, even if you took physics and could possibly get a 5 with some study and review, you should probably spend your time on something else more related to your own focus. So in this group we've got Biology with 7% 5s, Chemistry with 13% 5s, Physics 1 with 6% 5s, Physics 2 with 13% 5s. There are 2 other physics tests with higher pass rates that might be possible to self-study for students who want to show interest in physical sciences and engineering. They are Physics C, Electronics and Magnetics with 37% 5s, and Physics C, Mechanics with 30% 5s. Students who say they're interested in data science may be able to self-study for statistics with 15% 5s, and if they did, it would make their application much more persuasive. In fact, I think statistics is one of the best majors for many Chinese students to consider, and if you think you might be interested, I would recommend self-studying for this test over a year and experimenting with computational software like R. In addition, there are 3 tests that require you to submit a portfolio of works rather than take a test. They are Studio Art Drawing with 22% 5s, Studio Art 2D Design with 18% 5s, and Studio Art 3D Design with 11% 5s. You would need to be taking private art lessons over many years to be able to attempt these, and it would take at least a year to prepare for them. Redundant. In our final category are tests that you would need to be a different person in order to pass, and if you were that sort of person, then there would be no need to pass them. For instance, 66% of AP Chinese language takers get a 5, which means that it's basically a test of whether you're or not you're Chinese. In this category we have Calculus AB with 20% 5s and Calculus BC with 40% 5s. These tests are probably not harder than a normal math course outside the US. In addition to that, we have Chinese, French, German, Italian, Japanese, Latin and Spanish, which might be worth taking if you studied one of those languages for years in school and are not Chinese, French, German, Italian, Japanese, Latin or Spanish. Finally, there are 2 tests which introduce you to doing research in high school. If your school offers the program, you should sign up for it tomorrow. Otherwise, you can't really do it without an advisor, so you can forget about AP Seminar and AP Research. That's all for now, thanks for sharing and subscribing. In the meantime, check out my website, cliveparkinson.com. You can fully book and pay for an appointment online without even having to talk to me. It's the way of the future. Click here to see this video in Chinese, and until next time, stay literate.